A Quiet Romance is the subject of the #1 novel on the New York Times bestseller list and also an upcoming film by Steven Spielberg. Author Robert James Waller joins us now to talk about an extraordinary, appealing love story between a photographer on location and a farmer's wife. The book is called Bridges of Madison County, and we're joined by the author now. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
First of all, congratulations. New York Times bestseller list. #1 after some 25 weeks, and the book was first published, what, April '92, something like that. Is this your first book?
My first novel.
First novel. And you've already completed subsequent books to this.
Yes.
That have not yet been published?
Yes, I have at least 2 more novels finished, and numbers 4 and 5, whatever they are, laid out, or 300-400 pages into them.
What's great about this is, 1, the story of the book, 2, the story of the writer, and 3, the story that's in the book. I want to talk about each of those.
Right,
First, the story of the writer. How did you come to writing, you, a business professor at Northern Iowa State?
University of Northern Iowa.
University of Northern Iowa.
Well, it's a circuitous route, so I'll have to tell you a few background details.
Okay.
I was a professional musician, semi-professional, professional for 25 years, and played guitar and flute, and so the romance has always been there. I went to college on an athletic scholarship and became a photographer and started writing essays and so on. The actual book was written after I'd been down photographing the bridges, the covered bridges of Madison County, Iowa.
Did it come to you?
Absolutely.
In a moment?
It came to me in a 3-hour drive across the flatlands of Iowa in my truck. And it's very difficult for me to articulate certain things about it. I believe in magic, for one thing, that things happen to you, you know, that the universe talks. People in Iowa, I don't know about it everywhere, but a lot of people go, whoa.
And what did the universe say to you?
Well, the universe said to me that there's something going on inside of you that needs to come out. And I describe it as a bowstring being drawn back. It gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And I began to think about a song I've been writing. And it had a line in it called, I know you have your own dreams too, Francesca. And so that kind of flopped around, and I looked at the photography equipment on the truck seat beside me, and suddenly the name from Robert Kincaid came to me. What's going on here? And I stopped my truck in a little park, walked around, kicked the tires, went home. My wife was going through the equipment on the floor, turned on the computer, and wrote for 2 weeks, sleeping
almost nonstop.
2 or 3 hours a night maximum.
Yeah. And it flowed.
Oh, it was given to me. I never knew where the next line was coming from, but when I got to it, it was there. And that's hard, I'm sure, for people to believe, but it's true.
What did you have when you sat down? Did you have the notion of one force meets another force, 2 people come together? What?
I had 2 or 3 basic ideas. I wanted to talk about the notion of the unconventional, alienated male. The thing that really fascinated me to begin with was the intersection of 2 completely different worlds. Here's the mystical, world-traveling, sophisticated photographer who's been everywhere, and the farm wife who's rooted there in what she calls a life of hammering sameness.
Yeah. She's about 45, Francesca.
She's 45.
Yeah. And Robert Kincaid, is
52.
And what connects them?
Well, it's a mystical thing. It's partly that he's contented, as he describes it, but lonely and alone. She describes him as he gets out of his pickup truck. She said he looked like something from a never-written book called An Illustrated History of Shamans. Her first thought when she sees him, the sort of magnetic thing that does happen between people, in spite of the world's cynicism about that kind of thing occurring.
Tell me what you're saying about sort of the absence of passion, untapped passion, and the absence of even eroticism in people's lives. There, but not tapped, not touched, not connecting.
There seems to be almost some plot to keep people from being passionate, to keep people from being erotic. So many demands on our time. We put premiums on things such as, the Super Bowl, for example. I suppose that's a kind of passion, but we're not. I think we're talking about the kind of passion.
Relationships.
Yeah, that's in the book here. I think to maintain that kind of passion, you have to have an interest of some kind in the arts. I don't care if you're a plumber. I don't care if you repair typewriters. I think everybody should have some kind of interest in the arts, the music, the visual arts, those kind of things. Somehow that generates, for me at least, a sense of eroticism and a sense passion. My wife is an artist, too, so...
This is a love story, but it's also a story about responsibility.
Absolutely. It's a love story that turns into a story about responsibility.
And that's really what it's about, in a sense.
Well, it's both great passion and the kinds of decisions that come out of great passion.
I don't want to give it away,
Sure.
but I do want to deal with the notion of why this story has connected with America. This is not a book that was widely promoted and had a huge advertising budget. This is a book that's made its way to the bestseller list and to being #1. But something has happened in the bookstores of America. Before we get that, the notion of the selling of a book by booksellers and word of mouth and all of that, what's the connection you think about this story and readers so that it has crept to where it is?
I'll quote a few of my readers.
Okay.
Maybe that's a good way to do it. One said, in an age of great cynicism, you've shown that great passion is still possible. Others say that it explores the relationship between men and women in such a way that it allows them to open up, just the way Francesca does.
To be what?
In the book.
Open to what?
To the notion of passion when it comes along.
To be spontaneous and to experience.
To be more spontaneous, to be more creative, all of those kinds of things. People say the book has changed their lives.
Why do you think they say that?
Well,
what could change their lives about this story?
Well, one man called me. He happened to be from New York. He called me the other day and said that the woman he was in love with had lived in a cocoon for years and years and years based on a bad former relationship. They both read the book. She read it, and for some reason began to open up to him and say, "I think you're right. Great love is possible." So well, anyway.
Did you have any sense of this when you finished the book?
Yeah, I knew it was.
That somehow you'd caught on to a magical story?
For me, I had. And 4 or 5 of my trusted local readers at home read it and reacted the same way. And they were a cross-section of people, librarians, teachers.
Was it hard to get it published?
This is something another interviewer once accused me of being disingenuous, but this is absolutely true. I had no thought of publishing the book. I just wrote it for fun, because it was a story I had to tell. I remember I was a full professor in
business.
Economics and applied mathematics, and a nice life, So I was doing a book in economic philosophy when I wrote this. I wrote this thing because I had to write this book. And my local readers all said, get it published, you've got to. I said, oh, New York, that's a big deal.
Was it because you didn't want rejection?
No, it's just I didn't have time. I don't have a low tolerance for nonsense, for fooling around with marketing things. I'm not very good at it.
And so how did it get published?
The guy who had published my previous 3 books, which were essay books, nonfiction, read it. And he said, could I do something with this? Would you trust me? So he found me an agent in New York, got me in touch with them, convinced them that they ought to read the book, and they did.
And when did Steven Spielberg see it, or someone reading for him see it?
Well, Warner Books bought it in November of '90, along in there somewhere, and Spielberg bought it about 3 months later, in '91.
Have you had conversations with him about the book?
Not with Mr. Spielberg, but with his people out there.
And what kind of movie do they want to make, and who do they want to cast in the roles of Robert Kincaid and Francesca?
I'd like to beg off the second question because they're in the casting right now, and I really don't want to.
Well, do you have favorites?
Oh, sure.
Who do you see in your own mind?
Oh, I really let me back off of that. I'm afraid I'll get in trouble with.
All right, let me go down this line though, which is interesting to me. The Bridges. Look, let me show this cover. The Bridges of Madison County. They say they are metaphor for what, if anything, other than the fact that this is a photographer who photographs bridges?
I didn't intend them. See, that's what you get into when you write. I didn't intend them to be a metaphor.
At all?
It was a place, it was a reason for that photographer to come to Iowa.
That's simple.
Yes, that's simple. But
I don't want to read anything into it either.
But it turns out now people are seeing bridges between men and women and so on.
But it's none of that. It was just a good story for you that you had to write. Have you ever felt this urge before about a story?
No,
where you had to put it to paper?
No, I have about some songs I'd written, but the time involved is a good deal different. I mean, you might be able to knock off one of those in the evening or 2. Never quite like this. Don't know if I'll ever feel it again. Wonderful, zen-like ride.
How did you know when it was over?
I didn't. I kept wanting to write it. I told my wife, I said, no offense, I said, but I really don't want to do anything with the rest of my life except work on this book. She read it, and I kept trying to add to it, and she said, Robert, it's over. She says,
stop.
The characters have told you it's over. They don't want to go any further.
So she recognized it.
She recognized it. She's very bright about that.
It is said that this book became #1 by word of mouth, that independent booksellers. What happened?
Independent booksellers and readers themselves. Well, Warner's marketing strategy was simply to send out a large number of review copies. And in 4 or 5 different cities in the country, people who were influential in the independent bookselling community read it, started holding it up to their customers, saying, read this book. Yeah. The store in Sarasota, Florida, sold it a money-back guarantee at cost, just because they believed so strongly in the book. They sold 1,500
So they didn't
copies.
sell at the price it's on the flyleaf, which is $14.95. They sold it at whatever their cost was.
$9 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
They sold 1,500 copies in Sarasota, Florida, and in 1 or 2 months. Word started getting out. Publishers Weekly said, what's going on here? There's some bookstores selling this. People started talking. And all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, the curve was very slow to begin with, and now it's surging.
You recoil at the notion of a love story comparison, not out of disrespect for Eric Siegel, who was a Harvard professor, but simply because it was a different story and written for a different audience.
Vastly different story, vastly different audience. Has some of the same, tugs at some of the same emotions, I suppose.
Which is, we're all a sucker for a great love story, are
Oh,
we
of
not?
course.
Living and dying. And
well, that's right.
not a sucker. I mean, maybe that says something about our lives, that all of us, when we see one that seems to be real or seems to have some magic to it, we're attracted to it because of the absence of magic or at least the potential for magic in one's own life.
Absolutely. One of the reviewers said, one of the most charming things about this book is that the characters are extraordinary, and yet they're the kind of people you stand next to in the grocery line at the store. And I like that.
Because you want it to be ordinary people caught up in an extraordinary experience.
Exactly what I wanted. I think that's one of the reasons for the book's popularity. People say, this could happen to me.
Yeah. But he's not an ordinary man, is
No,
he? He's a
not.
photographer for National Geographic. He comes to Iowa. He's you said he's a mystic.
Of sorts.
There are also those, and I'm trying to stay away from an obvious question, who want to say that that Robert James Waller is Robert Kincaid.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, and you are in part.
To a large extent, yeah.
What part of you is him? What is it about him that's you?
One of the main things is this sense of alienation that I feel, estrangement from the modern world. He says that he feels he's ill-designed for the world in which he lives, and I've felt that way for a long time.
How so?
I was telling somebody the other night, I feel very comfortable with the notion of having been one of Emiliano Zapata's soldiers, for example, the dust in the wind, or sailing with Cook around the Horn. I'm a romantic.
Sorry to say, the romantic is the word you think of yourself.
Yes, unabashed, incidentally.
Then what are you doing, with great respect for Iowa and for University of Northern Iowa and for the profession of economics and business? What are you doing there rather than sailing the 7 seas?
Well, that's the subject of a couple of other books I'm working on. You're raised by a conventional father who came through the Depression, teaches you to be a responsible, conventional man and to raise a family. And you have this tug within your life all the time. Be conventional, be responsible, take care of your family, or just take off and do all kinds of crazy things. And it's a fascinating tension. That's the word I want, fascinating tension.
Is that the title of the book?
No, but it's, I have traveled a lot now as I've gotten older and so forth, gone off and done a lot of things. My wife will come down the stairs and see the gear stacked there, and she said, you're going? And I said, yes.
And when you go, how long do you go for?
Oh, without her, when I'm going by myself, 2 weeks usually.
Just go off somewhere?
Yes, just go.
I mean, around the world? Do you go to New York?
I might go to the coast of Maine and do photography. I might go to Oregon. I might just drive the truck around Iowa for 4 or 5 days.
Do you keep a journal? Do you write? I mean, is this a kind of exploration?
Sure. I carry a laptop computer with me. I do photography. I carry a small tape recorder.
How will this change your life?
The book?
Yes.
Well, it's already changing it substantially. One thing it's doing is buying us economic freedom to travel more, to do what we want to do, retire early, spend more time on the arts, which is what I've always wanted to do.
So this gives you the resources, in a sense, to be free.
Absolutely. There's no question about that.
And with that freedom, you will do what?
Do more of what I'm doing, explore the remarkable thing called the imagination. Not just mine, everybody has it. Just keep exploring that and seeing where it goes. It's the most incredible feeling to have that imagination rolling in its pure form.
Did you dream of this happening?
Very good question. My wife and a good friend reminded me of something recently. I told them 25 years ago one evening that when I was 6 or 7 years old, I used to sit in my minnow bucket along this river where I fished. I was 7 or 8. And I used to say to myself, someday you're going to do something. You know, a little boy or a little kid would dream, someday I'm going to do something. I used to say that to myself all the time. They just reminded me the other day that this might be what you were going to do with this book. And I thought that was nice that they remembered.
Good for you. The Bridges of Madison County, Robert James Waller, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list as of this week. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Good to have you on the broadcast.
It's nice to be here.